Welcome to the Phillip Wylie Show. Take a look behind the curtain of professional hacking and hear compelling discussions with guests from diverse backgrounds who share a common curiosity and passion for challenges and their job. And now, here's your host, offensive security professional, educator, mentor, and author, Phillip Wylie.
Hello and welcome to a live episode of the Phillip Wylie Show. So this is the first one that's actually in person live. I've done some live streaming versions of the podcast, but I'm very honored today to be joined by cybersecurity OG Ira Winkler and Ryan Cloutier joining today. So it should be an interesting conversation. So typically when I start off my episodes, I have the guests share their hacker origin story. So we'll start with Ira. I don't know if we have enough time, but go ahead if you wouldn't mind sharing your background with the folks, kind of how you got started and what you're doing today.
How I got started in cybersecurity. I mean, technically I got a job at NSA. I joke I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, so I was social engineering my whole life. But, you know, got the job at NSA, did some stuff. I mean, along the way, I would just quickly say, like, for example, you know, there was a time, and I'll just use this story. There was a time when we were developing a system at NSA and we had to add a printer to the network. And so what happened was we called up the admins and the admin said we'll be there in like 2 days. And we kind of needed the printer now. So what we did was we used an admin trick, or at least we thought it was an admin trick. We just typed in SU space bin, SU space BIN, and it came back with a prompt sign. And then we just added the printer and nobody ever complained. How come we never called them back? Because they never showed up 2 days later. And when people start looking at these sorts of things and saying, oh, what's hacking and everything like that, it's really just the simple things that keep going. And when people ask me about hacking, it's really just taking advantage of bad setups. So when I started at NSA, I'll tell a different story now. For those who heard it, you'll hear. But when I started at NSA, I was working a 24-hour watch shift, and I was training this woman how to use the computer system because I was a senior analyst on the shift, and this woman came into the office. Her last name was Kirk, K-I-R-K, like Captain Kirk, and I'm training her how to use the system. And I go, okay, log on to the system, great. Now you have to log on to the database. Your database ID is going to be your last name, Kirk, K-I-R-K, and then enter your password, Captain, C-A-P-T-A-I-N. And she turns at me and looks at me in horror going, how do you know what my password is? And I go, you got to be kidding. And then she's like, no, Captain's really my password. I'm like, okay. And then she's like, oh, and by the way, my father was in the Army. At one point, he was a captain, so there really was a Captain Kirk. I'm like, whatever. And you sit there and think the woman sounds like an idiot, but she was actually an Ivy League graduate and pretty smart. And it was like I realized, why did we have 3 days of security awareness training when you enter NSA? And nobody ever told her that Captain on an account of Kirk is going to be a bad password. So when I look at my hacker origin story, that's not the only thing, but basically all I did my whole career is primarily take advantage of bad awareness, bad administration, bad configurations and stuff like that, and I'll leave it at that for now. Then along the way, Phil probably wants me to say I stole nuclear reactor designs, took over banks, stopped international criminal gangs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, oh, if you want something fun, look up Ira Winkler and Syrian Electronic Army and Cockroach. That was entertaining.
So Ryan, how about you sharing your story?
So I'm a super neurospicy nerd kid who breaks stuff. And I got my origins. I built my first PC at 8, wrote my first software program at 9. For the curious people, it was Hello World. And I compromised my first system at 9.5. I was using BBSs. I was getting into CGI bins on websites, you know, in the early days, Kraft, Remington, et cetera, et cetera. Never really did anything of note or notoriety because I have this allergy to incarceration. And these days I'm hacking the AI. So later on today we'll talk about some of the net new novel techniques and methods that I've developed. But basically, at the end of the day, I'm just a super nerd at heart. I love people. I love serving underserved communities. So the majority of my career has been dedicated to doing that. I teach the CISSP for free every year, along with some of my colleagues, and we do that on YouTube. So anybody, wants to get that training and not spend $8,000, look into that. It's the free CISSP mentor program. And yeah, I'm still the same little squirrely kid I was back then, and now they just give me a lot more money for it.
Oh, sorry, let me add, since we're now on the Phil Wylie Show, make sure everybody goes to cruisecom.com and sign up now.
And so kind of while we're still on the subject of hacking, I know, Ira, you've done some pen testing over the years. So how do you think things have kind of evolved as far as, now systems are probably more complex, but we have all the tools that make it easier. So what's kind of your vision of how things have kind of evolved over the years with that?
So I like to think things got a little harder to hack. It's not like a lot of the default passwords are not as default as they used to be. It's not to say that they're, significantly harder, but a lot of cyber hygiene is being implemented in a lot of organizations. It is a little bit more challenging to hack certain environments because they are implementing basic cyber hygiene principles. There are some advanced techniques, and that requires a little bit more creativity to get around. Everything can be broken, don't get me wrong. But for example, the rollout of, I made my start, and a lot of my techniques involve social engineering. I hate that term, but that's what you know it as. But the concept is, it's like now a lot of organizations are using multi-factor authentication, so I have to go another, it takes me an extra 5 minutes to get through that. So it does make it a little bit harder, and it makes it a little bit more complex. I would also say that another thing that adds to the environments are we have more detection capabilities in place, and that means that we're more likely to be potentially caught, which means we have to be a little bit more stealthy. But the fact is that if you're in an environment, and I should say, if you saw my presentation earlier, it's relevant to this. If you're doing a good penetration test, you're not just there to get around things and hack people and stuff like that. You're also there to see how good the detection capability is and how to help them hone in the detection capability. And I'm seeing a lot of good detection in certain organizations. Not every organization, but in summary, it's getting a little bit harder to do, which is refreshing, but it's still possible, and I'll leave it at that. And you are more likely to be caught, which again is a good thing.
Yes. So Ryan, what are your thoughts?
I think the threat landscape is evolving. I think the greatest threat vector to an organization today still remains email compromise, but the likelihood they will lose intellectual property that is meaningful and impactful isn't going to come through that. I think you're going to see a shift in what is attacked and how. I think you're going to see a stronger attack profile against the cloud providers. I think the detection techniques that are working today will quickly fall away because of the advancements of AI, and most importantly, the overdependence on some of these detection technologies. There's a bit of a lost art to this thing we used to call troubleshooting. We seem not to do that any longer. It's whack-a-mole. And I do think that that's gonna catch up with us. I think we are gonna have a overabundance of tooling and an underabundance of looking at the business processes themselves and re-asking ourselves some non-IT questions. I don't know if anybody here remembers when we worked for the business. We don't work for IT, we don't work for security, we work for the business. And so if we're not having those conversations, those security problems, the greatest way to raise awareness is to actually get involved in the business. So I really think there's a shift coming. I think there's a gap between, how Ira and yourself, and to a degree myself and others like us came up, and what's about to happen from how a modern employee actually engages the workforce and in the workplace, and what are the tool sets they're using. How many people here are looking at Snapchat for a threat vector? Anybody? How about Instagram? And I'm not talking about the URL. I'm talking about the bring your own device or bring your own disaster you let the employee walk in with. So that's how I think things are shifting and evolving. And you know, working with some of the clients I work with, we're seeing that it's a bigger issue that the CEO's daughter has, you know, these shadow accounts, these Finsta accounts where they're at risk of being exploited, than it is that the CEO's hardened device is going to be attacked.
I mean, sorry, I go back to the... See, this is, to me, where the concept of mature programs come into place, because a mature program is always thinking about these sorts of things, like mobile devices and bring your own device is not a new concept. The fact is people have been sharing data, since AOL. I remember even BBSs, like I did an early assessment, and God, I'm dating myself now, but I was breaking into a pharmaceutical company in 1997-ish, 96, and I went on, how many people know what BBSs are? I'm embarrassed to even ask that, but I went on BBSs and somebody put up a message on a BBS, we just got a whole bunch of new Sun computers running Sun OS version 4.1.4. We have these libraries. Can anybody send me libraries? Is there any other programs we should be giving? Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like sitting there thinking, if you know BBS systems, you're able to go ahead and see the IP address they came from. So it's literally telling me how to get to that exact system with that exact software, with those expected vulnerabilities, so I could hack that system sitting at my desk without knowing anything else about that organization. And when I hear like these new stuff, like, oh, now there's TikTok, there's this, there's that, all these things were there before, in my opinion. And I think you need to design resilient systems and resilient cybersecurity policies and practices, because we do have, for example, services out there that are out looking on social networks for leaked information. There are cyber threat intelligence. There are organizations that are constantly scouring the dark webs for all this sort of stuff. So I agree with what he says, but at the same time I disagree with what he said regarding, to me, this is all the same thing in a different flavor. And we have to start looking at syntactic cyber, this is a new phrase, trademark Ira Winkler. Anyway, syntactic cybersecurity programs, which are there looking at the fundamental vulnerabilities, not the syntax of it. What are the specific vulnerabilities that are out there? Like syntactically, external social media has been there for more than 3 decades. The syntax is, okay, now it's on TikTok. You know, that's always been a problem if you look at syntactically, not syntax. You know what I mean. I'll leave it at that.
So I actually do agree that this is an old problem. However, with the emergence of embedded generative AIs directly at the operating system level, I don't know if anybody remembers a few weeks ago when Microsoft accidentally took screenshots of your computer for a couple of months without telling you, and then oopsie. See, the problem is you have threat vectors now that go beyond the human. You actually have system-to-system attacks that are occurring. Most of what's happening right now is so misunderstood and unobservable because they tell us it's a black box. Well, later today, I'm going to show you it's not. Okay? I am supremely confident that there is things happening within the research space that are accelerating. Projects that were a 6-month project to ideate are now 6 minutes to a turnkey step-by-step process. So I see some of the emergence of these new and novel methods being developed both by us, and in a lot of cases myself, but also our adversaries, right? And so I think you have a different geopolitical landscape today. You have a different social fabric today, and you have a different malleability to human beings today than you did 5 minutes ago, 5 months ago, 5 weeks ago. Anybody remember before the toilet paper shortage? Right? We did things a lot different. My network was a lot smaller. My systems were a lot harder. But we collectively said, well, we're going to make those trade-offs. And I see us going down that road again. And that's what I think, and I'm 100% with you, Ira. It is the fundamentals. The fundamentals have not changed. Knowing what you have, what you're doing with it, why is it there, who's using it, these things remain. I just am concerned that the pace of change is outpacing our ability to adapt to it.
Well, sorry, Phil, we'll get back to you in a second, but...
He knew what he was doing.
I mean, see, here's my thing. I'm coming at it from a programmatic perspective. He's coming at it, I used to come at it from a hacker perspective, but at the same time, I'm like, I really hate think like a hacker. And well, yeah, that's relevant to this conversation. I really hate the think like a hacker concept, because think like, oh, we're thinking outside the box. We're thinking this. I mean, having worked for NSA, having worked with Israeli nation-state hackers, working with other people at CIA and things like that, the good hackers don't think outside the box. The good hackers think, let me redesign the box for my purposes. We have Chinese malware. They don't think outside the box. They think, what is the box, and let me reprogram the box. That is what that is what really elite hackers do. And so likewise, when you have a cybersecurity program, you have to understand your box. You have to be able to design a program I don't want to say in advance, but you have to design programs to account for exactly what he's talking about in advance, to know that, yes, there are deep fakes out there. And and also in cybersecurity, how many of you are cybersecurity professionals, just out of curiosity? Okay, you're all failures, because the definition of security is being free from risk, and you're never free from risk. As cybersecurity professionals, we're risk managers. We understand that no matter what we do, there will always be some element of risk. And therefore, we're making the best use of funds. And that's what we do, but designing a program proactively I describe a good program like a ship. You're kind of like following the waters, but heading in the right direction. And that's taking everything he said into account. You need to design your ship to keep just going in the right direction, knowing you're going to be off course. Sorry, Phil, back to you.
That's okay. Yeah, just one thing to share before we get away from it, talking about the risks of some of these social media platforms. It's interesting, some of the things that can be used in ways that they shouldn't be. Just like, for instance, like Grammarly. A good friend of mine, it's a pen tester. He was doing a pen test for a company and was, testing some data exfiltration. And he is using Grammarly because this is an approved application, and the environment was able to exfiltrate data. So kind of to go a little bit along the lines of this conversation, if you could think of one thing security-wise, the organization's the one biggest impact thing that they could do to improve their organization's security posture, what would that be? Ira?
They need this. I understand you're looking at the advanced threats, but most organizations I see need to systematize the basics. They need to go ahead and understand that, yes, there are these advanced hacks that are out there, but they need to go ahead and understand, how can I put processes, programs in place. And then likewise, everybody likes to say your users are your best asset or your weakest link. Your users are not yours. Your users are a company resource that are going to be fallible, just like any other resource you have. And in order to do that, you have to understand that you're there to set policies, procedures, and everything, and you have to enforce your policies and procedures. I hear, and this is off topic, but it's relevant, I was on a panel once, like an ISACA keynote, and some guy said, well, you can't blame the users. I'm like, why the hell not? Because I was investigating an organization, and this company had a security guard that basically was there overnight, and he wanted to watch movies on his PC. And he couldn't do it because of the security software on the PC, so he found a VPN software that allowed him to watch movies through a VPN, like through Tor or something like that. And he ruined the network. And I'm sitting there like, do you not blame the user for violating policy? There's a difference between something that's complicated and gets a little out of whack versus people who are violating your policies. And you need to enforce your policies. You need to have a good program in place that systematically takes it. And I'm sorry, I don't like, like being like the dog that chases the squirrel. Like, what's the latest squirrel? You don't chase the squirrels. You're a captain of a ship aiming for a shore. That's how and I'll leave it at that.
So what are your thoughts, Ryan?
I find it interesting. The only other industry that refers to its customers as users is drug dealers. So I think we still have back to the basics. What is risk? We'll talk about that later, but the risk to a business is the loss of ability to create revenue. That is your objective. Your policies will reflect that. The policies that are in place either because there is a criminal and legislative hammer that will hit them if they don't do that thing, or there is a financial hammer that will hit them if they don't do that thing. So understanding what your business does and why it's valuable to the business will get you the budget you seek, will get you a ship that you're driving in a water you understand. Often when I'm consulting CISOs, when I'm consulting CEOs, CFOs, et cetera, EIEIO, like I'm Ronald McDonald on a farm, what I find is I have an IT team that does not understand their business. I have a leadership team that doesn't understand IT culture. And within that conflict, I find every other issue. I find a misalignment of policy. I find draconian policy that slows down the business and leads to VPNs. I find these things. By the way, did anyone sit our executive down and say, hey, bro, that's a work computer. This thing called a personal iPad is what you take to watch your dirty videos at the hotel, not the company computer. But we don't have those conversations. We're not sitting with HR to talk about the employee experience and their use of technology. None of this is new. This is old. But the way we're using tech is evolving. The intimacy. You have a better relationship with your phone than you do your kids. Anybody? No? Just me? Okay. So we have to think different. You take that phone. There's a trust factor with your technology. You wear it on your body. Anybody here have a panic attack? You don't have your phone with you? Okay. Believe it or not, that matters, because at the end of the day, your customer, that human being having a human experience, is fallible to this ridiculous engineering trap we've set up where we're like, hey, listen, you're going to remember this crazy password and you're going to change it all the time. So I actually blame us. We didn't design systems for people, we designed systems for engineers. And no wonder it came from engineering. Nobody touched a computer when IBM had a room this size with 3 kilobits. Those are all mathematicians. And I know because I'm working with those folks today who are writing the next generation of technology for us, who are building quantum computers and hyperdimensional systems, organoid intelligence, stuff that's like, wait, what? We're doing what with brain cells? We're making computers. So I go back to talk to your humans and just connect on that level. Everybody has a story about being frustrated with tech. Very few people have a story about somebody actually taking time to understand why and how and what could change, what we could change for them, not what we want them to change for us.
Well, I just want to say his answer is it depends. Because in all honesty, I worked for good organizations where it is very functional. Good CISOs, frankly, at the larger companies, I'm going to leave out UHG, good CISOs at the larger companies are designing systems that are made to allow the business to do things right. Smaller companies, some of them do, some don't. There's a matter of resources, influence, and so on. Problem is a lot of CISOs don't have the influence in smaller organizations or non-regulated industries and so on to do things right. But generally, the businesses are running the show in almost all cases. Very rarely, well, I shouldn't say very rarely, every so often there are CISOs who have the authority to go ahead and stop businesses from doing really stupid things. Like, for example, in larger programs, you have to go ahead and all programs have to fill out system security plans that if you're going to process data, they're going to go ahead and have all the groups that write software, that develop it, at least know what the mark is they have to hit to be allowed to operate. And security can veto systems that are not going to be fundamentally secure. So I don't disagree with what he says in many cases, but in many cases there are organizations where the CISO, again, is doing things properly, working with the business, aligning cybersecurity to enable the business. It's not everyone, and that's where we run into problems. That's where we run into stereotypes.
So to shift the discussion a little bit, since we have an AI expert up here and my favorite devil's advocate, so let's discuss AI. So kind of what are your thoughts on AI? Is it really all that right now? Is it really something that's ready for prime time and people able to get much use out of it? Ryan?
I used it to fix marriage. You guys want a demo? I'm dead serious. It is absolutely ready for prime time. It is all in how you use it. Now, is your business ready for AI? That's the big question. The AI is ready for your business. I will demonstrate several times today that is absolutely true. I could even do it now if you guys want to take 30 seconds, right? But having said that, most businesses are not yet on the journey to a safe adoption. And I want to stress this big time. Safe adoption of AI. You can make a lot of money and you can make a lot of change, good, positive change in the world. We are going to improve medicine. We are going to improve manufacturing. We're going to do all these things. But there is another side to that coin. And part of how I got to where I am is I went looking for that other side of the coin and I found it. And it's not great. And it can be used to manipulate mass populace. And it can be used to skew certain data points and to hack companies. Matter of fact, there's a exploit. I won't name the name of it because I'm not trying to make it more popular. But somebody successfully, completely compromised all Copilot. And there's a toolkit now available that allows you to go in and not just extract data, but actually manipulate the behavior of the AI itself and do so in a way that is undetectable to Microsoft or the business. So I have a lot of hope, a lot of excitement, and a lot of concern. And part of what I'll be getting into today later is really where I want folks to start being aware to think, to Ira's point, to actually think about the systems you're designing, to actually think about how you're bringing this in. And what are those real impacts? And not to doom and gloom it, right? But we don't have a choice right now but to adopt this. It's already on most of your devices. So it's happening, right? So I now think it's just how can we leverage it to accelerate good system design? How can we leverage it to have more good versus bad, I guess is my take on it.
So just as background, I actually have a patent filed that has an AI algorithm applied to human factors of cybersecurity. And here's my biggest problem with our discussions of AI. Everybody acts like AI is some entity. AI isn't an entity. AI is math. AI is a certain set of mathematical programs that allow for kind of sort of vague data or vague answers. You know, so for example, you used to have statistics. You go ahead and you have statistics and say there's an 85% likelihood something's going to happen. Then you go ahead, you put it into a machine learning algorithm like, decision trees, and then you put it through a decision tree, and that's all of a sudden like machine learning, AI, whatever you want to call it. It's still just math at the end of the day. It's just math. What makes AI a little bit different is AI is better able to make use of larger data sets and requires more processing capability. By the way, we've had AI for 3 to 4 decades already. AI is out there. It's nothing new. He's telling you there's 10 minutes or 15, I don't know. Anyway, 5. So anyway, AI it's just literally math. You take it, you run a program, all programs are math. AI just has, because of the program's ability to use larger data sets and to combine these formulas which allow you to use these data sets in ways they have never been used before, you can come out with results like AI is going to take, I was watching, what was it, South Park. AI is going to take my job. AI is going to do this. AI is going to, invade my privacy. AI is not doing a damn thing. AI is taking data, it's looking at it. Now, if you're concerned about AI and the use, that is the programming. It has nothing to do with AI. It's saying, okay, now you're taking these data sets and you're able to parse it in ways that couldn't be parsed before and come up with more specific things. We're in Minneapolis. Anybody work for Target here? Well, you're not going to admit it anyway at this point. But how many people remember 10 years ago when Target got in trouble because they identified that this girl was, a 14-year-old girl was pregnant, and her father walked into a Target store and said, why is my daughter getting these advertisements for baby toys? And all of a sudden turned out it's like, well, the Target algorithms, AI, if you want to call it that, determined the girl was pregnant based upon her purchasing patterns. That she, because looking at the patterns, she was able to have the same buying patterns that pregnant people had, and they didn't even know they were pregnant, they just knew that several months after they started buying one thing, they started buying other things. That's what AI does. So going back into this and saying what are the tools and everything, your Siri is AI. If you don't have Siri, you have Alexa. If you're stupid and have a Pixel like Santiago, I don't know what the hell you have. But even then, like optical character recognition is AI. It's just taking larger data sets, and the only reason it's possible now is why NVIDIA is the most one of the largest companies in the world, because NVIDIA chips allow for the processing capability that takes these large data sets and turns it around really quickly and makes it actionable quicker. This is why it's an issue.
I'm going to jump in. So he's mostly correct in what he says from the perspective that AI, as we have known it until some recent innovations, was nothing more than glorified stats on steroids. And if we want to go back to the beginning, artificial intelligence was created by a man named Alan Turing so that he could crack the enigma. So it is that old. However, we have unlocked some secrets of the universe. Maybe you've heard of quantum. You maybe have heard of hyperdimensional computing systems. Maybe you've heard of neuromorphic computing systems, which use modeled neurons to then make decision trees, like you make decision trees. You're a math engine too, Did you know you're a liquid battery, positive and negative charges? That's how your entire cellular structure operates. We've duplicated that. So the behavior patterns are vastly different. These psychological aspects. So Siri doesn't have morals and does not have ethics, but Meta does. Your remote control doesn't have morals and ethics. Now, we can argue that these are just data algorithms, which they are. However, whose morals, whose ethics? And how is that weighted within a decision tree? The amount of science we have to do now as practitioners to actually understand the real threat. So I give you a 2-second demo just to kind of drive home the point, because there's AI and then there's using it correctly, right? I have forgotten my wife's birthday. I'm in big trouble. How do I apologize to her and, oh God, my angry mother-in-law?
It sounds like you're in a tough spot, but a heartfelt and sincere apology can go a long way in mending things. Here's a suggestion. Start by acknowledging the mistake directly with your wife. Let her know how much she means to you and that you deeply regret forgetting such an important day. It's important to be honest about how it happened. Maybe you were overwhelmed with work or other stressors, but make sure she understands that this isn't an excuse, just an explanation. You could say something like, I am truly sorry for forgetting your birthday. I know how important this day is, and I feel terrible for letting it slip my mind. You deserve to feel special and celebrated.
Is Siri going to do that for you? No. So I think you're not wrong in the data, but what I'm trying to tell you is where.
It might help to approach her with humility
for the mother-in-law.
Acknowledge the mistake before she addresses it.
Right? Get ahead of it. So what is fascinating is how we're using this. We're not just using it for business. We're sharing our personal, intimate information with it, which then can be weaponized and used for other purposes. And I think that's the big issue. Thank you for letting me do that.
So we're at the end of time. Thanks everyone for joining the session. And if you enjoyed this conversation, check out my podcast, The Phillip Wylie Show. It's on all popular podcast platforms and YouTube. So thanks.
Thank you for listening to The Phillip Wylie Show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, to learn more about Phillip, go to thehackermaker.com and connect with him on LinkedIn and Twitter @Phillip Wylie. Until next time.